We're on the top now of Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. Ula holds that zikas l'nesua osasik suffik nesua. If, let's say, her original husband not only did erisin, but he also implemented nesua in a full-fledged marriage. Now, with his death and her status as shomeres yavam, we go down one level, and that's the level of suffik nesua. So, therefore, in the Sefer, when we talk about a woman who fell for yibum from nesuin, therefore, she has no rights to sell or give away these nechasim, and the Baal will take away these nechasim even from the lekuchas who bought these, purchased these pieces of real estate. That's in the case of a nesua. Now, in the case of a zkuka liyibum, she's not even a nesua to the yavam. She's only zkuka lo, and therefore status is that of, in the Gemara's language, a suffix nesua. So Beit Shammai holds that based on this suffix, we don't know who the nechasim really belong to, and therefore the best option is to split them, like Maman Amuta b'suffix cholkim yachloku, between the Yorshei Abal and the Yorshei Al. Beis Hill, on the other hand, holds that I'd rather be mamid the nechasim b'chezkasa rather than split them up. And Ula holds that zikas arusa osa suffik arusa. It's not a vade arusa. This halkadak vade avrusa. How is it possible to understand what it says in the Brisa regarding Shemeres Yavam, who fell for even from Erison and inherited property from her father? That Modem Beis Hillel, Shemocheres, Vinosenes, Vekayam, that she has total rights to sell and give away on nechasim. V'atnan, but what are you going to do with the Mishnah Ksubis that says the opposite? That if a woman had Kiddushin, and then Nafla Nechasim Beis Avia, her father died, Mishanis Arsa, once there was Erison, Beit Shammai Omrim Timkar, that she has a schus, and she retains a schus to sell the properties that she inherited from her father, because she wasn't yet Nesua. The Baal doesn't have any schus, any rights in her possessions until Nesuin. Beis Hillel Omrim Lo Timkar. Beis Hillel say l'chatchilu she's not allowed to sell it. But Elu v'Elu, both Beis Hillel both Beit Shammai and even Beis Hillel are modim. Machra v'nosna kayim, that b'di'evet, if she went ahead and she sold it, then the mecher is valid. So even though, again, Beis Hillel would argue l'chatchila lo timkar, but b'di'evet the mechira is valid. Kayim. Now, from the fact that Beis Hillel say that l'chatchila in the case of an arusa, she's not supposed to be selling the nechasim, then we would suggest that if zikas arusa would be a vadai arusa, then why Beis Hillel, why they moda that she could sell her nechasim l'chatchila? Because now we're back to the state of a vadai arusa. I mean, if you don't accept our argument that we're talking about in Ula's perspective, a suffix arusa, but if you would counter argue and maintain that it's a vadai arusa, then what's this elu v'elu modim shemachra v'nosna kayom? So in other words, Beis Hillel would moda. I mean, Beis Hillel argue that l'chatchila in the case of arusa she should not be selling the nechasim. And now, if you're telling me that zikas is arusa is equal to a vadi arusa, it didn't drop down one level, then how could Beis Hillel be moda that here she could sell? If she's a Vadi Arusa, we already know that according to Beis Hillel, a Vadi Arusa, lo timka l'chatchila. El shmaminam, we must assume, as we interpreted Ula, that we go down one level, and Zikas Arusa osa Suffolk Arusa. And therefore, in the case of a Suffolk Arusa, she's allowed to sell the Nechasim even l'chatchila, because it's only in a case of a Vadai Arusa, that's when we say she can't sell it l'chatchila. But here it's only a Suffolk. Now let's go to the other side of Ula's statement, namely that Zikas Nesua osa Suffolk Nesua. That if she felt the Yibam after Nesuin, the next level, which is called Shomer Yavam of Zika, goes down one level to a Suffolk Nesua. If you're going to argue that Zika creates a full-fledged Nesuin without going down one level, Kivadai Nesua, how are we meant to understand the Sefer in the case of Shomer Yavam, who fell from a Nesuin situation and died? That Beit Shammai Yachloku Yorshi Abal and Yorshi, that according to Beit Shammai, we're going to split the nechasim of this Shomer Yavam after her death between the Yorshi Abal and the Yorshi Ha'ava. Tanan, we learned in the Sefer of the Mishnah that we quoted earlier, just the opposite. If a woman is married, a full-fledged Nesuin, Naflu nechasim, she inherited an estate from her father. Misha Nisays, after Nisuin, is Elu v'Elu, both Beis Hillel, Beit Shammai Modim, that l'chatchila she cannot sell it. But she'im machar v'nasta, if she went in and she sold it, nevertheless that sale is not valid because we're talking after Nisuin. Shabal motzim miyad alekuchos. Now, Beit Shammai are moda that a Nesua cannot sell l'chatchila. And even b'di'evet, the mechira is not valid. So from the moment of Nesuin, the nechasim of b'cheskas habal, he has the more powerful koach than she does. And again, why is it that Beit Shammai say that Yorshei Ha'isha yekablu chelik nechasim? We split it up, and the Yorshei Ha'isha get half. That doesn't make any sense. What gives the Yorshei Ha'isha rights to have a claim on her Yerusha if she's a full-fledged Nesua? A Baal inherits his wife. No one else has rights to inherit it. Unless we say it went down a level after his death, El Shmamina Zikas Nesua also Suffolk Nesua. And since it's only a Suffolk Nesua, the Nechasim are not clearly, or totally, I should say, the Cheskes Habal. It's only a Suffolk. And Beit Shammai hold that she does not have a Chazok in these Nechasim more than the Baal. And basically we say that Yadu Shala Yavam, Yadu Shala Yavam, they're really equal. And neither of them have a better Chazaka on the estate. And therefore we say Yachloku. They still say no. Yada Yavam Adifam Yada Yavam. Because these Nechasim did not fall to her as an Nesua, and therefore her Yad is greater than his Yad. So Abaye, I'm sorry, Rabba is not happy. Amalei Rabba says to Ula, Ad mifligi begufa uliachar misa lifligu bechaya uleperos. Why is it that the machlokus between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai is formulated in the case of gufa shel karka, which we call nichsei malu, and also as far as who inherits them liachar misa if the Yevama herself dies? Is it the Krovia Isha, or do we say Yachloku? Why is that Machlokas formulated in terms of Gufa, the Karka itself in Nitzei Maluk? Liflagu, there should have been an argument between Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai, B'chayeha, even before her death, Uleperos, who gets to eat the peros. According to Beit Shammai, if we identify her din, her status as a Vadi Nesua, then she gets everything. Okay, her din is that of a Suffolk Nesua, we said, because we went down one level after the death of the husband. So Yada Yavam Ki Yada, they're equal, and therefore Yachloku. And Beis Hillel, on the other hand, hold the Nechasim always remain in their old Chazaka status quo, and he doesn't get any Zchus to Achilas Peros. And it would be a bigger chiddush to say that he gets caught in the Peros B'chayah as long as she's alive, Kamoa, as opposed to Liachar Misa. So the Mishnah does not mention in the Sefer that there's a machlokas b'chayah u'leperos. It only mentions the case where she died and the Yerusha. So we see clearly that the reasoning of Beit Shammai, who are modern narration that nechasim are b'chezkas sa, that means that b'chezkas sa, she has a greater chazaka, but she's alive. So therefore, we have to find a different distinction between the Reisha and the Sefer. We're going to say that the Reisha is where Beit Shammai were moded to Beis Hillel because she's still alive, and in the Sefer, where she died, that's where there's going to be a machlokas Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. Therefore, Ela Omar Rabba, Idi ve'idi, whether it's the Reisha or the Sefer, it's the Naflak Shi Nesua. She fell for Yibum from a marriage of Nisuin, a full-fledged marriage. And now we have a Zika from that Nisuin. The Zikas Nisua, Osis Suffolk Nisua. Okay, fine. So now let's see if we can work out the difference between the Reisha and the Sefer. In the Reisha, we said there was no machlok between Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai, and even Beit Shammai agree that the nechasim are in her chazak. The e kaima, that's because she's alive, and therefore havile e vadai the inu safek. She herself is a vadai mukzekes in the nechasim, because as we said before, she now owns the keren. The inu, the Yorshei Baal, meaning the Yavam, they're only a suffix. Their status as Yoshim is at the best is a suffix, because the Zikas Nesuin generates a suffix Nesuin, not a Vadai Nesuin. The ain't suffix Motzi B'dei Vada. So therefore, Hachazaka is more powerful, and she could sell the Nechas. That's in the Reisha. Now we get to the Sefer. The Sefer records Machlokas Shin Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. The Beis, when the Yevama herself dies. Halalu Boim Lirash, Halalu Boim Lirash. Right? The Yoshia Avkam to inherit her estate. That's called the Tainus Yerusha. And the Yavam, or his heirs, Boim Lirash. They also want to get the Yerusha. They also have a Tainus Yerusha. So both the Yorshei Baal and the Yorshei Yavam come with a Tainus Yerusha. And we have a suffix who inherits the property. It all boils down to the following question, whether Zika is Kiknusa. If Zika is Kiknusa, we recognize Zika as a full-fledged marriage. Then only the Yavam could Yorish and not the Yorshei. They don't get a dime. But if Zika is not like a Knusa, then the Yorshei Av have full-fledged claim to inherit the estate of her late father. And therefore the Yavam gets nothing. So we really don't have a single Yoresh who's muchzak in the Nechasim in a superior way. And that makes it into Mammon Amuto B'Safek. And therefore, hence, we understand Beit Shammai. V'yachloku, right? Beit Shammai holds yachloku. So we're going to take the estate and divide it equally amongst the Yorshei Av and the Yorshei Baal. But according to Beis Hillel, since during her lifetime, the Nechasim were in her chazaka, so that means that her mishpacha and all her heirs and relatives now have a chazak on these nechasim. And krovei ha'isha heim vadei krovei. The yavam is only a suffix of her, because we said that zikas nesuin only creates a suffix nesuin. Therefore, the Yorshei Baal will not have any claim to her Yerusha. And that's the Shita Beis Hillel that Ma'amidim es hanachasim b'chezkas son. And that means in the Krovei Isha. Now, if the Yavam is alive and the suffix is whether or not the Baal is Zocha b'Peiros Nichsei Ishto, in such a case, even Beit Shammai will concede that the Baal does not have the ability to remove the Chezkas Peiros from the hands of the Isha. She's a Muchzekes b'Nechasim b'Vadai. He is only b'Safek and ain't something motivate Vadai. Bayas Rabba Beit Shammai ain't Suffolk Motzimidei Vadai. That's your basic underlying premise. For Tanan, I'm going to prove to you that according to Beit Shammai, Suffolk is Motzimidei Vadai. There's a mission at the end of Avas. Nafal Abayis Olavial Aviv or Olavial Morisha. So we don't know who died first. So these are two scenarios. Scenario number one is the house fell on the father and the son. And scenario number two, which is a slight variation, the bias nafal olav and on one of Morisha. We don't know who died first. B'hayu olav ksubas isho balcho. So the Ben has outstanding debts, either to pay his wife's tsuba, or he borrowed money, has to pay back the borrower, the lender. And the Ben has no properties that are liened that could be collected in lieu of payment of his outstanding debts or the ksuba. However, his father or any other of the Morishim, they have nechas. So it works out like this. If these Morishim died first, that means he, the son, immediately upon their death inherited their property, and he would have to pay all the debts from the possessions that he inherited from Orisha. But if he died first, then he cannot inherit the Nechasim Orishav, And therefore, those creditors who come to collect cannot collect from the Nechasim and the Morisha. Yorshav Omrim Ha Ben Mes Rishon Ve'achkach Mes Ha'av. This is a claim of the Yoshia Av, correct? They're claiming that the Ben died first. If the Ben dies first, he never had his chusim in the chasim of his father. So he died basically penniless, and the Balchov can come and collect from now until doomsday, but he doesn't have anything to collect from. So the claim of the Yoshia Av is that the Baal, we call him the Balchov, but he's really the Ben, was never Zocher b'nechsei Aviv. And that's what we said before. The Balchov has no recourse to collect anything, confiscate any property. Therefore, the Yoshei Ha'av are claiming that we inherit the Nechasim of the father. But the Baal Chov Omer, the Baal Chov, on the other hand, is claiming Ha'av Mes Rishon. Just the opposite. We know that the father died first. So the Ben inherited his father. And then V'achakach Mes HaBen, and therefore, the father's claiming, the Balchov is claiming that let me get the Chedesh 1 second. That if the father died first, so the Ben inherits his father. Oh, so the moment that the Ben inherits his father, all those nechasim are mishubadim to the Balchov. And afterwards, when the Ben dies, the Balchov has rights to collect from the Nichsei Av that were inherited by the Ben. Beit Shammai Omrim, these nechasim are considered Momen Amutu B'Safek and Yachloku because we have equal claims and counterclaims as to who died first, whether it was the Ben that died first or the Av that died first. And therefore says Beit Shammai Yachloku. Beis Hillel Omrim nechasim b'chezkasa. The chasim remain in the chazaka of the Mishpachas Ha'av. They are certainly Vada Yorshim. The Balchov wants to be Motzi Moment from them, he has to bring a raya. Oh, so, okay, so fine. Now what's the Kasha Babai on Rabbah? In this case, in Babasra, of Nefilas Abayis, Yorshei Ha'av Vadai, they have a Vadai Chazak on the Nechasim. Right, they have Vadai Tainis Yerusha. And even if the father died first and his possessions and rights were inherited by his son, when the son dies, the Misas HaBen is immediately his nechasim fall to his Yarshim, not to the Balchov. Right? He doesn't get rights to go down and confiscate properties without bezdin. Balchov suffering. Right? The time of the Balchov leads us only to a suffering. Because if the Ben died first, then his nechasim are not mishubadim and never were mishubadim to the shtar chov. He has a note, he says, Shlo yorash haben es hanechasim. Nimtza, it comes out the afsha yorshim vadai v'balchov safek. Nevertheless, according to Beit Shammai yachloku, the safek emotzim vadai, the safek, which is the balchov, he rejects the vadai, that vadai there Yoshia. So how can you tell me that according to Beit Shammai ain't something motzei b'dei vadai? We see here clearly, explicitly that Beit Shammai maintained that suffix is motzei b'dei vadai. So the Gemara answers no, ain't something motzei b'dei vadai. In the Mishnah in the Filas Habayis, that the Balchov gets part of the Nechasim, according to Beit Shammai, even though he's only a suffix and they're vadai, that's because the Yorshei Av are not considered vadai vis-a-vis the Balchov. To Chasavri Beit Shammai, Shtara Omed Ligvos Kigavlidom. That since the Balchov has a shtar in his hands, he's considered as if the Nechasim were in his possession. And that's called shtar omed ligvos kigavlidom, as if it was already collected. So if you're going to say that shtar chov, the Baal shtar is muchzak b'nechasim, in a case where we don't know who died first, if indeed the father died first, and the ben inherits all his nechasim, then immediately the Baal chov is zoche in these nechasim. But im haben mes tchila, the son died first, so he never inherited his father's possessions, then the Yarshim are considered mukzakim b'nechasim. No one's more mukzak than the other one, and therefore it's moment of mutab and suffer. And cholki. So the Gemara asks me, no, Tamra, how do you know that Beit Shammai hold that Shtara Omed Ligvos Kigavri Dami? Tisnan, we have a Mishnah in Sotach of Dalid. If a woman had kinui from her husband, he warned her not to go into a private place with so-and-so, and she had a stira, she went into a private place with so-and-so. That's the process of sota, of hashkas sota. It's mashka the mayim merorim to check out and investigate and determine whether she was mizan and she had this extramarital relationship. And the Mishnah says, Mesu baleim, if the husbands of suffix sotas died ad shalosh shasu before they got to complete the process and give her this concoction to drink, because she can't drink unless her husband's alive. It says ve'evia ishes ichto. So we cannot clarify whether or not she was mizana. Is Beit Shammai omrim notlos ksubason v'enon shosos. In other words, even though they can't drink, but nevertheless they get the ksuba. Beis Hillel omrim o shosos o lo notlos ksubason. So according to Beis Hillel, either they drink the water, she drinks the water, and again, what's the suffix? The suffix is whether notlos ksubasim, after they drink, they get the ksuba, or no, they don't have the right. There's no possibility of they're drinking, and therefore they cannot collect the ksuba. And since it's possible that there was a znus, and we can't clarify that, therefore haksuba is in a suffix. And they cannot be motzi mama misafik from Yoshia Baal. So the Gemara clarifies, are you telling me that when Beit Shammai say och, Beis Hillel says och shosos, behavior ish es ishto, Omer Achman of Aleka? What do you mean shosos? Where's the husband? So again, Ve'evi Ishas Ishto Amrachmanav Aleka, the Baal is dead, so she can't drink after his death. Ella, but what does Basil have in mind over here? Mitoch Shaloshosos, as a result of the fact that their husband died and they cannot drink, and we have no way of clarifying whether they had this extramarital relationship, is therefore lono los ksubasa. And again, we're going to apply the principle of Motzi Mechavero, that the Baal is now mufsuk in the money of ksuba. But Beit Shammai holds that Shtara Omed Ligvos Kegavli Dam. And that's what we're going to see now. For Hacha, in the case of Suffolk Sota, this Suffolk who, the Suffolk whether they get a ksuba, because Suffolk Zanai, Suffolk Lo Zanai, we don't know if she was Mizana or not. If she was Mizana, then she doesn't get a ksuba. If she wasn't Mizana, she gets a ksuba. Nevertheless, according to Beit Shammai, Asi Suffolk Vada, the woman is the state of Suffolk. And notlas ksubasa, she collects a ksuba, motzia midei yorshei Baal. She takes it away from the possession of the Baal. He's gone, but I mean, is he shot? And why? Shehem vadim utzachim b'nechasim. And yet earlier we said that according to Beit Shammai, ain't Suffolk motzia midei vaday. El shmamina kol shtara omed ligvos kegavli dami. According to Beit Shammai, her status is not that of a suffix. Why? Because she's holding on to the ksuba, and that's as if she already collected a ksuba. It's kegavli damin. She has a chazak on the nechasim as a result of the shtar ksuba that's in her hand. And the Yorshei Baal are a suffix. Because they're coming to be motzi from her yad, from her possession, with a tiny suffix. Maybe she was mizana. So since it's only a suffix, ain't suffix motzi v'dei vadai. That's why Beit Shammai hold that she gets her ksuba. So the Gemara says, V'Abaye didn't hold that the reasoning for Beit Shammai in the case of Nafal Abayis Yachloku is because the Shtar Omed Ligvos Kegavli Dami. But rather he held that since there's a suffix is motzimidei vadai. So why did he raise an objection and ask a kash on Rabbah, who says that according to Beit Shammai ain't suffix motzimidei vadai? You see clearly from the Mishnah Nafal Abayis Olav El Aviv, and that's a Mishnah Shnuya. Is losvei miha. Abai should have asked the kasha from the Mishnah in Sota, which is in Seder Noshin, because from this Mishnah as well, you can derive the conclusion that suffix is motzei vada. I mean, if you don't derive from this Mishnah, it's Shtar Omed Ligvos Kegavli. So the Gemara answers, Dilma Ksubas Isha Shiny. That in the case of Sota, we have a suffix, it's motzimidei vadai, and that's based on the nature of ksuba, that the Chacham made a takana that she should collect a ksuba even in case of suffix, mishum china. No, so to make sure that she still finds favor in the eyes of her husband, that he should still want to remain married to her. And now you're going to tell me that she doesn't receive a ksuba. The women don't want to, they're inhibited from getting married. They're going to be afraid that the husband will give a kinui when she never was mazana, and they'll be mafsid of the ksuba shalom kidin. So there's no proof from here that Beit Shammai holds suffix motzimidei vada. So the Gemara says, "Velosve." Why nabayes kekash to Rabba from ksuba de masnisin? There's a din of the ksuba in our Mishnah. From our Mishnah itself, you can prove that suffix is motum devad, because the Mishnah says, "Ma yasa biksubasa ubenitzay anachasim vayotzim ima beit Shammai omer yachloku." Which means yachloku yorshei abalim yorshei ha'isha in a ksuba misafik, and the yorshei abalim is safik in the case of ksuba. The yorshei isha is safik, and nevertheless yachloku. You see that safik is motzim vada. So Gemara says lo pligi. There's no question from our Mishnah, because there was no machlok between Beisil and Beit Shammai with regard to ksuba. Beit Shammai concede that a ksuba is b'cheskes yorshei habal, and since you cannot be over the ksuba during the lifetime of the Baal, the Yavam steps into the shoes of his late brother, the Baal, and she cannot collect her ksuba during his lifetime. So since she died during the Chaya Baal, she loses her ksuba, and her Yarshim cannot collect her ksuba. And there was only a machlokas van nichsei b'lu. I just want to see if we can. I think at this point, it's getting very late. Still have a lot to do here. We'll stop. So we're up to Vilo, which is about let's say about 7 or 8 lines up from the bottom of the Yom. We'll try to finish it up if we can during the course of the day. So let me wish you a great day.
Yom Tov.
Yom Tov. Thank you so much.